has restarted discussions on charter change after a year-long break. But committee lawmakers are divided on whether or not they can proceed as a constituent assembly or a CONAS. To help us understand this, political analyst Romel Banlawi is joining us over the phone. Good afternoon, sir. What is a constituent assembly again, or CONAS as we more popularly call it? And can you tell us what other ways are there to propose changes to the Constitution? We know there are several ways to do this.
Good afternoon. Yeah, based on our existing constitution, the 1987 Philippine Constitution, there are three ways to amend or change our existing constitution. One is through constituent assembly, where both houses of Congress will convene themselves to change the charter. So they will be the delegates of changing the constitution or amending the constitution by virtue of three-fourths of the votes of both Congress. But it's not very clear under our constitution on whether the two chambers will vote separately or jointly. And the second way to amend our constitution is through constitutional convention, where there will be delegates to be elected by the majority of Filipino voters. And the third way to amend our constitution is through people's initiative. So these are the three ways. But all these three measures to change our constitution requires the approval of the majority of Filipino voters, whether to approve or reject the amendments or change in our existing constitution.
All right, so can you tell us and our viewers exactly what is being convened over at the lower house right now? Is this going to be a CONAS or just a committee hearing?
It is just a committee hearing. It's just a hearing among themselves in order to determine whether there's a need to form a constituent assembly or a need to create a constitutional convention. So we are still in the preliminary stage of discussions for purposes of amending or changing our constitution. So we are still in a very early stage of charter change. So still under discussion, they're still discussing it. In fact, right now, there's still no clarity on the part of the positions of both Congress on whether they will form a constituent assembly or create a constitutional convention.
All right, but let's beat them to the chase and look ahead. Are there possibly any loopholes that they can take advantage of within these processes that you just explained to us? Do you see anything?
In my opinion, I think they're just discussing this matter because of the inability of our existing structure to really respond effectively to the many challenges of the pandemic. And I think discussions on charter change is diverting our attention away to the crucial issue that we need to face, and that is the addressing the pandemic and making necessary measures for post-pandemic recovery. And in my opinion, I think talking about charter change is premature right now because the timing is not very good, and talking about political matters is not are not very relevant right now, especially that next year it will be election season, and by 2022 we will elect a new set of public officials. So I just consider it premature to talk about charter change right now.
Well, what
But
about...
the good thing about what's happening right now is we are discussing about the matter, and it can contribute to the continuing political education of the Filipino people, because I lament the fact that three out of four Filipinos do not know about the details of our constitution, except college students who are taking Philippine government and constitution as their subjects. But largely, the majority of the Filipino people do not know the details about our existing constitution, and they do not know the implication of charter change for their daily life. So what we need is to really educate first our people on the pros and cons of charter change, so that we will create an informed community of Filipino voters who will in fact approve or reject existing amendments or changes to our Constitution.
All right. Well, what's on the table right now are just economic changes. They keep calling it an economic charter change. A lot of opinions seem to be floating around that you don't actually need to change the constitution to allow these changes to happen, and you can actually just get Congress to just legislate them. What are your thoughts on that?
Based on the proposal submitted by a proponent from the Senate and from the Congress, the primary target of constitutional charter change is the economic restriction enshrined in I think Article 12 of our Constitution that pertains to national economy and patrimony. But I also see other proposals asking for amendments of the general provisions of our Constitution, and that is Article 6. And there are also proposals asking for amendments of Article 4 of our Constitution pertaining to education, science, and technology, arts, culture, and sports. But I think beyond that, there are in fact a lot of issues that we need to address in changing our Constitution, particularly one, the lack of clarity of our existing Constitution on anti-political dynasty law. And at the same time, there's still no clarity under 1987 Constitution on the process of constitutional change itself, particularly on the issue of constituent assembly. So there's no doubt that we need to amend or change our Constitution in order to clarify all those ambiguous provisions that we can find in our Constitution. But right now, to pursue this charter change is, I think, not prudent, it's not timely, and it's not responsive to the current needs of the Filipino people. Because right now, I think the current needs of the Filipino people is to cope effectively with the current pandemic and to have effective measures on the part of the Philippine government for post-pandemic recovery.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the insight and the time, Mr. Romel Manlawi, political analyst. An election lawyer is questioning the timing of lawmakers' sudden push for charter change. PLM College of Law Dean George Garcia tells Agenda that these discussions should have been done at the beginning of the president's term to allow for wider discourse. Speaker Lord Alan Velasco's resolution of House Number 2 will serve, or both House Number 2, will serve as the mother measure for the deliberations regarding several economic provisions of the Constitution. Garcia believes it is wiser to call a constitutional convention or CONCON since election season is coming up.
With all due respect to our well-meaning congressmen and senators, pag po kasi ang mga members of Congress ang kumalikot, Sir Sito, lagi pong may suspect o merong pagdududa, teka muna, lalo pat gagalawin mo sa panahon na next year election na.
The lawyer also believes that amendments to the Constitution are not necessary to fix the party list system. He says constitutional amendments must only be done if we want to abolish the system altogether. According to Garcia, laws regarding the entry of party lists must be revised instead. And the Philippines will sign a tripartite agreement with LGUs and AstraZeneca on Thursday. The country is also set to seal a conclusive agreement with other vaccine makers anytime now. That is, according to vaccine czar Carlito Galvez Jr. For the details, we have Maricel Halili joining us live from Mandaluyong. Hi, Mase. How many doses are we getting from the AstraZeneca deal in total? And what does Secretary Galvez mean with conclusive agreement?
Yes, Sean. Roughly around 20 million doses are expected once the deal with AstraZeneca will be sealed come Thursday. But it's also good to take note what vaccines are. Carlito Galvez mentioned earlier. He said that there's about 7 vaccines that is actually progressing now. He said that once all the negotiations with these 7 vaccines succeeded, probably we'll have a good estimate when it comes to the number of vaccines which will come in the country. Earlier, Secretary Galvez mentioned that these includes Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Gamaleya, Sinovac, and if we get the total number of vaccines which will come in once all the deal is signed with all these 7 vaccines, approximately 140 million doses are expected to come in the country within the year.
Has the government disclosed how they are planning to ensure the equitable allocation of vaccines to different LGUs, especially those in far-flung areas?
Secretary Galvez mentioned earlier that if the funds of a local government unit will only allow them to purchase like 30% of their requirements, the national government will provide for the 70% left. Now, if the LGU doesn't have enough funding to sign a tripartite agreement with some of the vaccine manufacturers, the national government will provide all the requirements for that specific LGU. But Sean, I also would like to add that aside from AstraZeneca, Secretary Galvez mentioned that some of the vaccine manufacturers also allowed or already allowed a tripartite agreement to be signed. So aside from AstraZeneca, there's also Moderna and Novavax. So we already have 3 vaccines that can enter tripartite agreement, meaning agreement with either private sector or LGU and the manufacturer together with the national government.
All right, now, of course, all this vaccine talk, again, I have to ask you on our storage capacity. What is the latest on this?
Sean, Secretary Galvez discussed about the storage facility, and it's very important right now because it seems that Sinovac won't be the first vaccine which will come in the country. After the press briefing, in the press briefing earlier, Secretary Galvez mentioned that there is a possibility that Pfizer will come in first by February, to be followed by Sinovac, and then AstraZeneca, and then if the deal will succeed, Gamaleya will come in fourth, and the rest of the vaccines will come in the country by 3rd or 4th quarter of this year. Now, the representative of COVAX facility, which will actually, the agency that handles the Pfizer, will check our storage facilities before the end of this month, this January, to ensure that we have the right facility to store Pfizer vaccines, meaning those storage facilities or cold chain that can accommodate or that can have a 0 or below 0 temperature that can store Pfizer vaccine. If we pass this requirement, there is a chance that Pfizer will come in first before Sinovac.
Thank you, Marcel Halili, for these updates. An official from the League of the Provinces of the Philippines wants provincial governments to take the lead in vaccine procurement of cities and municipalities. League President and Marinduque Governor Presbitero Velasco Jr. tells Radyo 5 that the aim of this is to avoid confusion. He says they will meet with Vaccine Czar Carlito Galvez Jr. and Health Secretary Francisco Duque III regarding vaccine distribution. The group also vows to ensure fair vaccine allocation for provinces that cannot buy on their own. Senator Risa Ontiveros hits Malacanang for saying that the Pfizer vaccine will only be given to major cities such as NCR, Cebu, and Davao. Ontiveros says residents of rural areas are also taxpayers. In a briefing last Monday, Roque said that only major cities could get the U.S. firm's vaccine due to the lack of cold chain storage facilities. The senator says such burden should not be placed on the public's backs and should have been included in the government's inoculation plan. Ontiveros says she will bring up the matter in the next Senate hearing on the government's vaccination plan on Friday. For more updates, visit News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World online. Visit our website, onenews.ph, for more in-depth analysis. You can also catch One News on the Signal Play app. Register for a free account at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Sean Yao. We are One News. We now throw you back to the House Committee discussion on charter change.
To answer the query. Check Olivar.
Kung Edsel, correct me, just to clarify a question, no? Were you asking if there has ever been an empirical study showing that foreign investors would respond to a more liberal regime in a country? Am I correct in understanding?